I want to say thanks to our thespians who brought the word to us this morning. I have to confess, when the events went along this week, I thought I needed to probably look for a different passage. This is the passage for the lectionary this week, and I was going to look for one that maybe more specifically applied. And then I started to think about this passage and started to look at it again, and I realized there's a lot in this passage that is worth listening to, paying attention to. That there are things within this that ways God might be speaking to us to give us some guidance as we sit in this situation. And it began right there at the beginning, in this first place, where in the first couple of verses, what you read is that Jesus left Judea and started back to Galilee, but he had to go through Samaria. Notice the word had. Wasn't he got to go through Samaria, or he just went through Samaria. No, it was Jesus had to go through Samaria. You're likely aware of the enmity that existed between the Jewish people and the Samaritan people. I won't go into the details for why this was the case. You can guess for yourself, because it happens all over the world in all sorts of places. Pakistan and India, Palestinians and the Israelites, the Irish Catholic and Irish Protestants, the black and white. We got Republicans and Democrats. There's just so many ways that there are places that we have issues between each other. We all have our own kind of Samarias. And you might say that we're kind of entering a kind of Samaria right now. I'm not saying the Samaritans were a virus, just the opposite. Rather, in this story, that their region kind of serves as this place that Jesus' disciples had to journey through, and they didn't really want to go through it. I can imagine that there was some dissension when Jesus said where they were going. Like, come on, Jesus, really? Can we go the long way? Can we avoid this region? I really don't like it. And if Jesus' disciples were anything like my kids, at some point they would have uttered this, "Ugh, I don't want to do that." Like the disciples, we don't want to be here in this kind of Samaria. We at first maybe wanted school canceled, but as we realize the consequences of it, we don't really want school canceled. And we don't want work canceled. And we don't want people to lose their jobs. We don't want to have to cancel our trips. We don't want to not be able to go to Disneyland to see our relatives. We don't want to stop being able to get together and have coffee or dinner. We don't want to have to go through this Samaria. Ugh. Can't you feel it? Can't we go a different way? Robert Frost, in his poem "A Servant to Servants," has the narrator say, "The best way out is always through. The best way out is always through." Brothers and sisters, we're going through Samaria. There's no going around it. It's not a question of whether we're going through it, but of how. How will we journey? How will we be? And how will we behave? Halfway through the journey, Jesus and his disciples arrive at Sychar. The disciples go on to get supplies. They go down to get flour and salt and oil and, of course, toilet paper. Jesus sits down by the well. While he's recovering, someone else shows up. This woman shows up. She's keeping proper social distancing, and she's getting her water, but she is jolted from her routine when she hears this voice say, "Give me some water." We get a sense of her surprise when she replies, "How is it that you, a Jewish man, are asking me, a Samaritan woman, for water?" Jesus was kind of breaking the rules. He was not supposed to do this. It's a little bit like, maybe you've had this experience this week. You go to see someone and you're keeping your distance. You maybe do a little elbow bump or you nod in front of them, and they open their arms and they come towards you like they're going to give you a big hug. You're like, no, stop. You're not supposed to do that. Jesus is sort of breaking the rules. He's not supposed to talk to this Samaritan woman, and yet here he does. Jesus, in this sense, He keeps the physical boundaries appropriately. He doesn't force himself on her, but he does break these cultural boundaries which had been imposed upon one another between the Jews and the Samaritans. Jesus decides that although he's in this situation, it's not going to stop him from doing ministry. That this may be a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. Jesus isn't going to stop doing ministry. He's just going to change how he does it here in Samaria. We're going through Samaria, and it doesn't mean we stop doing ministry. It only means we change how we minister. Following the rules doesn't mean stop connecting with one another socially. It just means we change how we connect with one another socially. One of the examples, a couple examples from this week, the food bank, we met on Wednesday. We had the food bank. The volunteers were there. It went really well. We had a lot of folks who showed up. But we had to ask, how are we going to go forward with this? And after some discussion, we realized for the sake of our volunteers' health and safety, we were probably going to have to close the food bank. But then on the other hand, we started to think about all the folks who rely upon the food bank to get them through the week. And this is only going to heighten that need, this situation that we're in right now. And so we held that with the other hand, and we started to talk, and we had a discussion. And we started to have some ideas. And in those ideas and in that discussion, we remembered that many years ago, we used to do food bank in a different way. We used to pack up bags with food, and then we would give them out to folks. We changed that for some very good reasons. But now, for this season, it would be helpful if we went back to it for a while. And so we came up with the idea that some of our volunteers will come in early Wednesday morning. They'll pack the bags. A couple of other volunteers will be there and meet folks at the door and hand out the bags, so that it'll limit the amount of contact, and yet people will also get food. Not the ideal situation, but it's certainly better than canceling. We're not stopping ministry. We're just changing how we're going to do it. Worship. Here we are, right now. This is different. When we got the word on Wednesday that we needed to stop in-person worship, our first inclination was to think, well, we have to stop worship. But if you read, I think it's in Isaiah, where Isaiah says, if we stop to worship, then the rocks are going to cry out. So we don't need to stop worship. We're just changing how we do it. Connecting with each other. We're not able to get together physically in the same sort of way. So when the elders got together, we said, how can we connect with each other? And came up with the idea of calling and connecting people. And so very likely, I hope you got a call this last week from one of the elders asking how you're doing, how we can help, and how we can pray for one another. That'll continue to happen over the weeks to come. We're in a challenging situation, but there's opportunities that exist within it as well. Maybe you have some ideas for opportunities. If so, then write them in the comments section. I invite you to write down there some of the ideas you have or for what opportunities this situation might be presenting. So, back to the story. Jesus and this woman have a conversation that ends up being even deeper than the well that they're standing next to. But their spell of their conversation is broken when the disciples show up. They return with their flour, their oil, their salt, and a 24-pack of off-brand toilet paper. Now, here's the moment where we see the responses go in a couple of different ways. We have the disciples' response, and we have the Samaritan woman's response. First, the disciples. John tells us that when the disciples arrive, they are astonished. You can translate this in a few different ways. They marveled, they were shocked, they were flabbergasted, they were flummoxed, they were confused. I wonder also if there were some other feelings that were going on, that perhaps they were a little anxious, they were a little worried, they were a little disturbed, or even perhaps frightened. Evidence from other passages to how the disciples approached the Samaritans would lead us to believe that fear would have been a part of it as well. And if you flip over to Luke chapter 9, you see this story where Jesus and the disciples want to go into the Samaritan village, but the Samaritans say, no, you can't come in. So as they're leaving, James and John turn to Jesus and they say, hey, Jesus, do you want us to call down fire from heaven and destroy this Samaritan village? What? I wonder if Jesus was like, wait, hey, how long have you been following me? Does anything about me say that I want you to drop bombs from heaven to destroy this village? No. They're afraid. And when we get afraid, It leads to other people being afraid. Yes, this virus is contagious, but you know what's more contagious? Fear. Have we not seen that this week already? Go to the grocery stores. We're afraid we're going to run out of everything. But it doesn't just end there. And if we're not able to keep the spread of this contagion from spreading, there's worse fears, worse consequences to our fear. I was talking with a friend of mine who lives in Port-au-Prince in Haiti. His name's Valerie, and they don't have any cases in Haiti that they know of yet, but there was a bus that came over from the Dominican Republic, and on that bus someone was sick and thought to have had the virus, and so when they put the person in quarantine in a hotel, there was a crowd of folks who surrounded that hotel and attempted to burn it down because they were afraid. In Montreal, a first world city, I was talking to another friend who talked about going to a meeting for their borough, for their neighborhood. And in that, they found out there was someone in the neighborhood who had the coronavirus, and people started to ask questions. Well, who is it? Where do they live? And I said, were they asking out of curiosity and concern? And she said, oh, no. They were asking out of fear, out of anxiety. Just a couple steps, perhaps, from violence. Yes, the coronavirus spreads and is contagious, but fear is a virus that spreads even more rapidly and perhaps at times can cause even more damage. The disciples were on the verge of their own kind of fearful epidemic, and Jesus talks them down. He says, don't you see? Don't you see? I have other food to eat here. You're looking at this place in the wrong sort of way. There are other ways to connect. Look around. The disciples, you see a contaminated place. And Jesus says, I see a field that's ripe for the harvest. I see life here. You see a place that is full of the other, and I see sisters and brothers. So as we go through Samaria, how will we see each other? As a threat? As competition? Or as friends and companions and collaborators in this? How will we be and how will we behave? This was the disciples' response. Now, what about the woman's response? How did the woman respond to her encounter with Jesus? Well, after the disciples arrived, she runs back down to the village and begins to tell people, come and see, I just met a man who told me everything I ever did. Now, at first glance, this doesn't seem like a whole lot. I mean, she's seen a fortune teller and he told her what happened to her a couple of days before. Or maybe, it seemed it's not much of a miracle that she's sharing. I mean, Jesus didn't do much of a miracle. He couldn't even get water from a well. It's not that impressive in that way. And yet, there's some sort of miracle in this. What is the miracle? Well, think for a moment. Have you ever encountered someone who knew you? I mean, who really knows you? Who knows everything about you? Who knows your gifts and your flaws? Who knows the way you shine and your shadows? Who knows your joys and your burdens? Who knows how you present yourself to everyone else and also all these things that you hide? You met someone who really, really knows you. Someone who knows everything. If you're like me, I'm honest, the answer is no. I mean, my parents know me in a certain way. They don't know everything. My siblings know me in a certain way. They don't know everything. My kids know me. My friends know me. Erin knows me better than anybody else, and yet she doesn't know everything. Heck, I don't even know myself. I don't even know everything about myself. And the truth is, I don't know that I want to know everything. And I sure as hell don't want everyone else to know everything. And yet, here, we get this story. This woman saying that he's told me everything I ever did. I've said before, if you knew about me what God knows about me, you probably wouldn't listen to a word I say. And this seems to be some of the miracle. It's not just that Jesus knew this woman. That's pretty amazing. But what else is amazing is that she, in knowing that Jesus knew her, How did she respond? She wasn't ashamed. Unlike Adam and Eve, who once they realized God knew everything, they tried to hide, she is incredibly excited. She's like, oh, someone knows me completely, and they still welcome me. This is the miracle, perhaps. This, perhaps, is the miracle that caused her to then go and share her story with everyone else. Someone who knows everything about me, and he's still all in on me. Come meet this guy. This is the miracle. This is the amazing thing. And here's what we read. Many Samaritans from the city believed in Jesus because the woman's testimony told me everything I'd ever done. Viruses are contagious, yes. Fear, yes. It's even more contagious. But you know what else is contagious? Kindness and listening and love. It's slower, takes longer, takes crosses some boundaries, it takes risk. It involves slowing down, paying attention. It's not easy. But when it catches fire, no walls, no fences, no boundaries are able to keep it out. This is a small, very small example, but this is a small example. But Friday, I took Will and Benjamin to the library to get some books and stuff before the library closed. And while we were there, we realized it was closing not just at 6 o'clock, but indefinitely. And as we walked into the library, immediately we realized someone had hit the table next to the library, like next to the entrance, and all of these brochures and these pamphlets were scattered all across the floor. My first response was frustration and disgust. Like, who would do that? Knocking all these things out of here. My second response was, someone should do something about this. And I'm going to go tell the librarians what's happened out here. And as I started to turn the corner, I'm not sure which one of whether it was Will or Benjamin who did it, but one of them turned and started to turn around and bent down and started to pick up the brochures. And just like that, the spell was broken. And I was infected with clarity. Oh, yeah, that someone should do it, and that someone's us. And so the contagion spread, and all three of us bent over, and it took less than 30 seconds to pick these little brochures up and put them back. Kindness is contagious as well. So how will we be? How will we behave? Will we be afraid, or will we be a friend? Will we be courageous? Will we be contagious? Not contagious with the virus. No, not contagious with fear. But to be contagious with kindness. Be contagious with courage. Be contagious with love. As we started in the beginning and Nick led us through, can we remember that God is our refuge and ever-present help in time of trouble? God is in the midst of the city. God is in the midst of Samaria. God is in the midst of this epidemic. God is in the midst of our lives and the lives of our neighbors. Be cautious, yes, but also be courageous and be kind. Let us pray. Lord, we thank you for these words from long ago which continue to give life and give life and give life. May they be words that give life to us in this time. Life that is able to be courageous in the midst of fear, that is able to be kind in the midst of selfish temptations, and that is able to be loving in the midst of a time when we want to circle the wagons and draw in. Lord, as we go through a kind of Samaria, remind us that you're with us and you see things a little differently. Help us to have eyes to see as you see, ears to hear as you hear. Help us to have hands that reach out as you reach out. Lord, we thank you and we ask these prayers in your name. Amen. Speaking of opportunities, we have a few mentions of opportunities. So I want to invite Sherry to come up and list some of those.
So, practicing social distancing doesn't mean we remain socially distant. Opportunities to serve and connect remain. We just need to approach things differently. The food bank is one example. Here are some others. We are still planning at this time to do a church spring cleaning on March 26th. You'll still get your weekly church email. You should be getting a call every week from an elder. You can leave comments at the bottom of this video, and you can continue to give. You can donate online or you can mail in donations.
So I invite you to stand wherever you are and receive this benediction and this charge. If we go back to the story, what do we see happens? Not only were the Samaritans taken with Jesus, but guess what happens? What happens to the disciples? They end up staying, not for a few hours, not for a day, but 2 days. They end up staying in this place that they just wanted to get through. Brothers and sisters, we don't know how God can use this challenge. May the God who is able to change our perspective, the God who is able to be in the midst of challenging situations, may this God go with us as we go into our various cities and into our various places as we continue to walk through this journey together. Go in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Until we meet again, all God's people said,
Amen.
Go in peace.